The universe is a vast, infinite expanse of wonder, a mosaic of beauty and complexity populated by civilizations of stunning diversity and technological achievement. And then there were humans. The Galactic Confederation had stood for over 12,000 years before humanity blundered onto the interstellar stage. 12 millennia of careful diplomacy, cultural exchange, and obsessively detailed protocols meant to cover every imaginable scenario. Or so they believed. No one had anticipated the humans. Ambassador Zilkar, the human delegation has arrived, announced the automated assistant. Its tone was melodious by design, yet somehow managed to convey exasperation, despite being programmed for strict neutrality. Zilkar of Vorax Prime adjusted his ceremonial robes and sighed. All four of his breathing orifices exhaled simultaneously, producing a sound not unlike a pipe organ being assaulted by an overzealous child. "Send them in," he said, "and activate translation protocols, Level 7. Level 7 included metaphor analysis and cultural context filters, absolutely necessary for dealing with humans, who seemed biologically incapable of saying what they actually meant. The Confederation followed a sacred tradition dating back to its founding. When a new sentient species achieved interstellar capability, they were formally welcomed into the Alliance. As a symbol of trust, they were granted the honor of naming another member's homeworld. A solemn gesture, it allowed new civilizations to leave their mark on the galactic map. For 12,000 years, these naming ceremonies had been performed with dignity. New species chose names that reflected admiration, poetic respect, or scientific appreciation, tributes to the planets and cultures that shaped the Confederation. Then the humans arrived. "Yo, Silky baby, how's it hanging?" Ambassador Shen of Earth sauntered into the chamber with the peculiar gravity-defying gait humans called walking, classified by most other species as controlled falling. Shen grinned, baring teeth that had been artificially whitened. Humans were the only species known to bleach their food processing implements for appearance, just one of their many baffling customs. "Ambassador Shen," Zilkar greeted him, his translator rendering harmonic resonance into human speech. "The naming of the Mibelosian homeworld is a matter of great significance. I trust you've selected a designation worthy of their 5 millennia of philosophical and artistic advancement." "Oh, totally," Shen replied, casually flipping through a data tablet. "Been studying their culture for weeks. Did you know they've got 27 words for dignified silence? Not one for practical joke, though. Fascinating species." Zilkar's neural clusters pulsed with alarm. Humanity's obsession with humor had nearly broken the Confederation's translation algorithms. Before humans, no language system had required a subroutine capable of distinguishing "just kidding" from a declaration of war. The Mibelosians, Zilkar reminded, are providing critical antimatter containment technology. The name you assign will be recorded in every navigational database across 27 galaxies. This is a matter of permanence. "Permanence," Shen echoed. His grin widened. "Got it. Don't worry. This name will be remembered." Exactly Zilkar's fear. The last time Zilkar had witnessed human humor firsthand, it nearly triggered a war with the Arachnid Consortium. The human envoy had made a pun about web conferences and burst into laughter. The consortium, for whom silk production was a sacred act, had not appreciated the wordplay. It took 3 days of frantic diplomacy to avert disaster. Now these same humans were about to name the homeworld of the Mibelosians, a people known for solemnity, introspection, and a complete lack of humor. Zilkar's secondary brain began running simulations of potential diplomatic fallout. His primary brain kept smiling. "This ceremony is the result of 17 standard cycles of negotiation," Zilkar noted. "Their technology will revolutionize antimatter containment." "Plus, their cuisine is amazing," Shen interrupted. "Those glowing squid noodle things? Delicious. Philosophical tendrils," Zilkar corrected. "They symbolize the interconnection of corporeal being and transcendent thought." Right, Shen nodded. "Super deep. Anyway, did you know Mibelosians evolved specialized vision that can detect humor?" They literally can't see jokes coming. Wild, right? That was objectively false. And Zilkar knew it was false. But humans often spread misinformation for comedic purposes, which made parsing their intent nearly impossible. Ambassador Shen, may I inquire as to the nature of— Whoops, look at the time. Shen glanced at a primitive wrist device. Humanity was the only known species to wear time-keeping instruments on their bodies, apparently unable to track time internally. The pre-brief starts in 10 minutes. We'll catch up later, Zilki. And with that, Shen was gone, leaving behind only a faint trace of volatile organic compounds, a practice humans called cologne, and a mounting sense of diplomatic doom. Zilkar's administrative assistant floated into the chamber, her gaseous form shimmering violet within its containment field. A member of the Nephrosoan species, she pulsed gently. Ambassador, the Mibelosian High Council has arrived in the ceremonial chamber, her translator intoned. Their bioluminescent displays indicate extreme anticipation and honor. Understood. Has there been any indication of what name the humans selected? Negative. As per tradition, the designation remains confidential until the formal ceremony. Zilkar's tertiary brain, dedicated exclusively to disaster modeling, began firing red alerts. Contact the Confederation Protocol Office, he instructed. Inquire about emergency procedures for naming ceremony disruptions. Is there cause for concern, Ambassador? Zilkar stared toward the ceremonial chamber, where the fate of diplomatic tradition hung by the thinnest of threads. Let's call it a precaution. The humans are involved, Zilkar said simply. That is cause enough. The great assembly hall of the Galactic Confederation shimmered beneath a ceiling of cosmic splendor, literally. The crystalline dome was embedded with fragments of 1,000 suns, collected from across the known universe. Beneath this luminous canopy, representatives from over 500 sentient species had gathered, each adorned in ceremonial attire showcasing the height of their culture's aesthetic and technological accomplishments. The Andromedans wore crystalline structures that defied gravity and bent light into impossible geometries. The Veltraxians were encased in living memory metals that morphed continuously, displaying scenes from 5 millennia of history. Even the Quantum Collective, beings who existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions, had stabilized their forms, just long enough to manifest in iridescent robes that flickered between existence and non-existence. And then there were the humans. Dressed in black and white formal wear they called tuxedos and evening gowns, the human delegation looked almost laughably mundane. Only humans would select ceremonial clothing that prioritized throat constriction and discomfort as markers of dignity. At the center of the hall stood the Mibelosian High Council. Their translucent exoskeletons glowed with bioluminescent patterns of deep reverence and solemnity. Mibelosians communicated as much through light as they did sound, and today, they were radiant with anticipation. High Counselor Iblux of Mibelosia stepped forward, her mantle trailing tendrils of shimmering light. For millennia uncounted, she began, our world has been known to our people as the cradle of enlightened thought. Today, we humbly accept a new designation from our human allies who have proven themselves. The translator hesitated, if only for a fraction of a second. Barely perceptible, but not to Zilkar. It translated the word unique. Ambassador Chen approached the central podium, flanked by his human diplomatic team. Zilkar's unease deepened. Several of the humans appeared to be suppressing what their species called laughter, but what most other beings interpreted as mild respiratory failure. Esteemed members of the Confederation, Chen began, adopting a serious tone. Earth is honored to bestow a name upon the magnificent homeworld of the Mibelosian people. We have studied their culture, their philosophy, and their extraordinary scientific contributions. So far, so good, Zilkar thought. Perhaps miraculously, humanity would meet the occasion with the dignity it required. The name we propose, Chen continued, reflects the Mibelosians' dedication to astronomy and their unique position within our galactic quadrant. It acknowledges their philosophical legacy and honors their physiological distinction. The chamber murmured its approval. Even Zilkar allowed himself the smallest internal exhale. Perhaps his fears had been, "We name this world Prime." The translation matrix paused. 2.7 seconds of silence followed, an eternity in computational terms, as it processed the linguistic mapping across 500 languages. In those moments, Zilkar accessed the human cultural archive via neural uplink and felt his blood vessels constrict in horror. As the final translations were rendered, several things happened at once. The human delegation burst into what they termed stifled laughter. The Mibelosians' glowing patterns shifted from tranquil blue to a flickering, confused yellow. Zilkar's emergency diplomatic subroutine activated and silently transmitted a code burgundy. Human humor incident in progress. Containment required. Too late. The name had been formally proposed in the Great Assembly. According to Confederation law, a designation could only be rejected under one of 37 specific conditions. Tragically, Contain's juvenile anatomical pun was not among them. High Counselor Eblix's glow patterns swirled erratically. "Our translation matrix indicates multiple interpretations," she said cautiously. "Ambassador Chen, may we inquire as to the primary intended meaning of this designation?" Chen stepped forward again, his face arranged into what humans considered a serious expression, an expression that fooled no one who had spent more than 15 minutes studying human behavior. The term erectum, derived from ancient Earth scientific terminology, celebrates the Mibelosian contributions to astrophysical knowledge, particularly in the study of celestial bodies, Chen said with utmost gravity. Behind him, a junior diplomat made a noise like a malfunctioning air filter and was swiftly escorted from the chamber. The hall erupted into a flurry of translated whispers and database queries as delegates scrambled to make sense of the situation. The quantum collective existing across time already knew how this catastrophe would unfold. Several of them had preemptively phased out to alternate timelines. The Hydraxian delegation, suspended in hovering aquatic tanks, emitted a series of ultrasonic chirps, possibly disapproval, possibly amusement. Their vocalizations were notoriously difficult to interpret. The crystalline mind of Betelgeuse, who communicated by rearranging its molecular structure, had reconfigured itself into a universally recognized symbol of second-hand embarrassment. Zilkar felt all 6 of his hearts sink simultaneously. And yet, protocol held. The naming ceremony could not be interrupted. No one had trained him for this. Eblix's glow turned ultraviolet, a wavelength typically reserved for significant diplomatic displeasure. "Our linguists," she said icily, "have now completed a more thorough analysis. It appears the name is a pun, a human play on words referencing an excretory orifice." The chamber dissolved into chaos. The Arcturian delegation, known for their extreme literalism, began examining anatomical schematics with alarming precision. The Nebulans, who reproduced via quantum self-duplication, visibly struggled to understand why anything related to waste expulsion could be funny. The Proxima Centauri III representatives, whose society revolved around status and decorum, initiated emergency social distancing protocols, turning their backs on the human delegation in synchronized revulsion. To his credit, Chen at least looked somewhat abashed. "There may be unfortunate phonetic similarities to certain Earth terms," he admitted, "but I assure you the primary intent, enough." The voice echoed through the chamber like a gravity rupture. Grand Arbiter Zol, the oldest living member of the Confederation Council, rose from his hover throne. His ancient Veltraxian frame trembled with effort as he stood. "In 12,000 years of this Confederation's existence," he began, "in all the recorded history of the Confederation, no species had ever violated the sacred trust of the naming ceremony. Until now." The chamber fell into a stunned silence. Even the humans, usually unshakable, now appeared genuinely concerned. "Emergency." Council session, declared Exhal. The assembly dispersed in a flurry of tentacles, limbs, gravitational folds, and dimensional shifts. From across the vast hall, Zilkar locked eyes with Ambassador Chen, who had the astonishing audacity to offer what humans referred to as a sheepish shrug, a gesture that somehow managed to express both regret and total absence of remorse. That moment, Zilkar understood. This was only the beginning of what promised to be the most diplomatically challenging crisis of his centuries-long career. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation Council had been underway for 6 hours, practically a record for efficiency, considering the last session, triggered when the Dralaxians accidentally evolved into a gaseous state mid-banquet, had dragged on for 18 months. The council chamber, an immense perfect sphere lined with hover platforms customized for the biological requirements of 500 distinct species, hummed with the overlapping murmur of simultaneous translation feeds. "This is an unprecedented diplomatic crisis," announced Councillor Tax of the Volmrians, her feathered crest fully flared, in agitation. "The Mibelosians are threatening to withdraw from the Antares Accords if this insult stands." "Perhaps," offered Representative Grood of the Implexian Collective, "humans simply don't grasp the cultural gravity of naming rights. Their own planet's name translates rather unimaginatively to dirt. That interpretation fails to capture the full scale of the problem," countered Ambassador Zarek of the Hive Consciousness, his compound eyes refracting the chamber's ambient light in unsettling kaleidoscopic patterns. "Our analysis suggests the humans knew exactly what they were doing. This was not ignorance. It was deliberate provocation." "Provocation for what?" Tax asked. "What could they possibly gain from antagonizing the Mibelosians?" "Amusement," replied Zestic flatly. "Our xenopsychological profile of humans shows they frequently engage in behavior devoid of practical purpose, purely to generate what they call entertainment." The chamber erupted into a wave of translated disbelief. The idea that an advanced species might jeopardize diplomacy for a fleeting moment of amusement was incomprehensible to most. At the heart of the storm, Ambassador Chen sat flanked by his increasingly uneasy team. He stood and spoke, each word chosen with meticulous care. "I acknowledge that a grave misunderstanding has occurred," he began. "However, I believe we can still find a diplomatic path forward." "How?" demanded Zilkar. "You named a world revered for its philosophical wisdom after a human anatomical joke. The Mibelosians have already begun drafting formal censure. The statistical likelihood of diplomatic recovery is approximately 0.087%. This last figure came from the representative of the algorithmic consciousness of Tayeti, who communicated exclusively in statistical probabilities. "Recommended course of action," the Tayetian continued. "Formal apology. Immediate retraction of proposed name. Voluntary acceptance of Level 3 diplomatic sanctions against Earth." Chen's eyes lit up. A human signal known to precede either brilliance or catastrophe, with no reliable indicator as to which. "Lenos Rodriguez," he said, turning to a previously silent junior diplomat. "You studied ancient Mibelosian linguistics at the Galactic Academy, didn't you?" Rodriguez adjusted her formal attire nervously. "Yes, Ambassador. I specialized in pre-class Mibelosian dialects for 3 years." "Did you find anything linguistically significant in our proposed designation?" She hesitated, then her expression changed as realization dawned. "Actually, yes. In archaic Eastern Mibelosian, especially during their Third Enlightenment period, there's a phonetic resemblance between erectum and the word urium, which translates roughly to blessed prosperity or fortunate ascension." A storm of neural net searches and linguistic queries rippled through the chamber. "Is this accurate?" Zilkar asked the Confederation's chief linguist, a Moravian octopoid whose skin rippled with meaning. After consulting the databases, the Moravians' chromatophores confirmed it. The term exists, obsolete for 3 millennia, but the phonetic similarity is linguistically valid. Across the chamber, Chen met Zilkar's gaze, his expression wearing that unmistakable human smugness that transcended species boundaries. Was this their plan all along, or were humans simply masters at improvising their way out of self-inflicted crises? This is too convenient, Ambassador Zestic objected. The odds of such a linguistic coincidence are approximately 0.0085%, the Tedian interrupted. Marginally lower than our earlier projection for diplomatic recovery. Therefore, the coincidence itself now represents the most statistically viable resolution. The chamber fell into stunned silence. High Counselor Eblux, who had been observing with increasingly complex illumination patterns, finally spoke. If this is true, then what appeared to be an insult may, in fact, be an extraordinary coincidence. The tension in the room dropped by 64%, according to Zilkar's emotional atmosphere sensors. Indeed, Chen said smoothly. When our research team discovered the phonetic connection, we were struck by the serendipity that our proposed name echoed an ancient Mybolosian term for prosperity seemed like cosmic destiny. Several mystically inclined species signaled appreciation. The Synchronicity Collective, who believed coincidence was the universe's primary form of communication, were visibly moved. Our records also show, added Rodriguez, that during the Third Enlightenment, Mybolosian philosophers often sought to reclaim forgotten terms and reintegrate them into modern discourse. In a way, we're participating in that cultural tradition. By accident. It was a stretch. A galaxy-class stretch. But Zilkar saw the Mybolosian delegation's bioluminescence shifting toward a more open, receptive spectrum. His tertiary brainstem throbbed with suspicion. The explanation was far too perfect, but the alternative, that humans had desecrated a sacred tradition for the sake of a butt joke, was simply too damaging to admit. Perhaps, Zilkar said cautiously, we should officially record that the name honors this ancient Mybolosian word, while acknowledging the unfortunate resemblance to certain human terminology. The proposal swept through the council like a balm. No one wanted an interstellar incident over etymology. No one wanted to lose access to Mybolosian antimatter advancements. And absolutely no one wanted to spend another 6 hours in emergency session. A reasonable compromise, High Counselor Eblix agreed, her glow now pulsing with cautious acceptance. Though I recommend future naming ceremonies involve more rigorous linguistic screening. Thus, the crisis was narrowly averted. The official record would state that the designation honored an ancient Mybolosian word, with no mention of human anatomical humor. No one was entirely satisfied, but everyone could declare some measure of victory, which, in the end, is the essence of diplomacy. 3 standard months later, the Confederation's Procedural Committee unanimously passed Resolution 7281B, formally titled The Human Naming Restriction. Its text was remarkably concise by Confederation standards. Resolution 7281B was brief, just 1 sentence, but it carried the weight of millennia. Human representatives shall not, under any circumstances, be granted primary naming rights for any celestial body, space station, or dimensional anchor, point within Confederation territory. It marked the first time in 12,000 years that a single species had been explicitly restricted by procedural law. It wouldn't be the last. The resolution passed with unprecedented speed and unanimity. Even the Chronovarian Collective, a species that existed simultaneously across multiple timelines and typically required centuries to reach consensus, synchronized all temporal instances long enough to vote in favor. The human delegation accepted the restriction with apparent grace, though several xenopsychologists noted subtle facial cues suggesting amusement rather than remorse. At the reception following the vote, Zilkar found himself beside Ambassador Chen at the gravitational buffet, where food items floated at varying altitudes to match the dietary needs of hundreds of species. No hard feelings, I hope, Chen said, somehow managing to consume a gelatinous protein cube while speaking, a uniquely human multitasking skill. Cultural misunderstandings happen all the time in galactic diplomacy. Indeed, Zilkar replied neutrally, though most don't result in formal procedural amendments. True, Chen conceded, plucking a floating sphere of fermented Proxima Centauri nectar. But in a way, we made history. First species-specific restriction in 12,000 years. That has to count for something. Is that an achievement you're proud of? Zilkar asked, genuinely curious about the human perspective on what most would call a diplomatic humiliation. Chen's expression shifted into what xenopsychologists dubbed a smirker, a facial configuration that defied easy categorization. Maybe not proud, he said. But no one's going to forget humanity anytime soon. That, Zilkar admitted, is undeniable. Across the room, he noticed the Mibelosian delegation engaged in animated conversation with several junior human diplomats. Surprisingly, their bioluminescence indicated genuine amusement rather than residual offense. Your junior diplomat, Rodriguez, appears to have established quite a rapport with the Mibelosians, Zilkar observed. Lenos has a gift for cross-cultural communication, Chen replied. And between you and me, she really did study ancient Mabelosian dialects. The linguistic link was real, even if our original intent for the name was less academic. So you admit the name was deliberately chosen for its anatomical innuendo? Chen's face turned inscrutable. A human specialty. Let's just say, we knew it worked on multiple levels. The ancient Mibelosian connection was a fortunate bonus. Fortunate indeed, Zilkar said dryly. Without it, we might have witnessed the galaxy's first interstellar conflict sparked by a butt joke. Chen laughed, a sharp human vocalization that still triggered proximity alarms in more skittish species. That's what I like about you, Silky, he said. You understand the power of language. As if on cue, Rodriguez caught Chen's eye and offered a subtle thumbs up. Beside her, the Mibelosian delegates pulsed with light patterns indicating intellectual curiosity and cultural engagement. What's happening over there? Zilkar asked, his suspicion sensors flaring. Cultural exchange, Chen said innocently. Rodriguez is introducing them to human humor. They're teaching her pre-classical light speech. Apparently, the Mibelosians are developing quite the appreciation for puns. They find the dual meanings philosophically fascinating. Zilkar felt a distinct sensation. His species classified it as impending procedural complications. You're suggesting, he asked slowly, that after nearly causing a crisis with humor, you're now deliberately introducing the concept to a species previously unfamiliar with it? Chen's grin widened, revealing those unsettlingly white teeth. Think of it as cultural enrichment. Besides, the resolution only bans us from naming things. It doesn't say we can't share our unique creativity. As if to prove his point, one of the Mibelosian delegates suddenly emitted a ripple of light that caused the rest of their group to pulse in synchrony with unmistakable mirth. It was laughter, Mibelosian style. What did they just communicate? Zilkar asked, already dreading the answer. A joke, Chen said, visibly proud. Their first attempt at human-style humor. They asked, "What do you call a spatial anomaly that defies classification?" And the answer? Nothing doing. Zilkar's translator matrix froze for 3 seconds before offering a cultural annotation. Nothing doing is a human idiom signifying refusal or impossibility, while simultaneously referencing the concept of an anomaly defined by its lack of definable properties. Zilkar sighed. That's actually a surprisingly nuanced pun. They're quick learners, Chen said, glowing with pride. Give them a few years, and they'll be naming moons with puns that make our diplomats blush. And that was the moment Zilkar understood the true threat humans pose to the Galactic Confederation. It wasn't their technology. It wasn't their unpredictability. It wasn't even their unnerving ability to consume food while speaking. It was their capacity to spread chaos, cloaked in the trappings of cultural exchange, to even the most dignified species in the galaxy. The Confederation had endured wars, plagues, and dimensional incursions. Now, it faced its greatest trial yet, an outbreak of human humor, spreading civilization by civilization, one terrible pun at a time. As Zilkar watched the Mebolotians experiment with wordplay and emit their first puns, he mentally drafted what would soon become Resolution 7282A, Guidelines for Cultural Exchange with Human Representatives. But deep in his tertiary brainstem, he knew the truth. It was already too late. Somewhere in the galaxy, a planet named Erectum Prime continued its stately orbit, blissfully unaware that it had become the punchline to the most enduring dad joke in galactic history.